And we're live. We're live, guys. Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Good Morning Liberty. My name is Michael Boldin. It is Wednesday morning, October the 3rd, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. So good morning to you, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be tuning in or whenever you happen to be tuning in. I'm very grateful for you joining me today. I want to get right into it. I think the Kavanaugh hearings and the discussion over it is primarily political circus. Most of it is total garbage. As I've talked about on this show, I've covered Chris Ann Hall's work on this. I've talked about what Judge Knapp had to say about his views on the Fourth Amendment. We've also covered his views on war powers. And this morning we published an amazing article from one of our best writers, T.J. Martinell, called "The Rubicon Has Been Crossed Years Ago." Short version is that very few people, I mean, other than probably us here today, but few people in the political realm, the establishment media, many of the people in the alternative media, the activist organizations in Washington, D.C., and of course, the senators, the president, everybody. No one is talking about Kavanaugh's views on the Constitution. It got some coverage early on, but the only discussion are these allegations against him from decades ago, and whether true or not, have far less to do with his job duties as a Supreme Court justice than anything else. His view on the Constitution is what they should be discussing. And my conspiracy side tells me that some people either want this or have pushed for this to happen as a distraction. Because how can you be part of the resistance to the Trump administration, the people on the left? And Glenn Greenwald talks about this often. How can you be part of the resistance but be okay with giving him more centralized power over war or more surveillance power or whatever it may be? And vice versa. How can you be a constitutionalist or a conservative and be okay with giving the next president, who is potentially, I mean, I personally think Trump will win a second term, but at least at this point, but then the next Democrat that gets in office, how can any of these so-called Republicans be okay with giving the next person even more power than Barack Obama had? So I think much of it is a huge distraction. You get us all involved in the bread and circuses. This is what empires have done for a long, long time, and people ignore the real discussion. Certainly, it is interesting to watch. I've spent a little bit of time taking a look at it. I've not watched any of the hearings, but I've commented on it. I've talked about it. I'm talking about it right now. So it is interesting, and there is some pretty salacious drama, and who isn't attracted to that? Otherwise, look at the TV shows that are popular these days. It is interesting political theater, but if we really care about the Constitution and liberty, we'll try to ignore that as much as possible and point out the issues at hand. And I think we've been doing this on this show. So I want to get into one of the biggest problems that we're facing today, and that is the size and scope of the government, which can in some ways be measured by its spending and debt, and it is getting bad. So, but before we get to that, hello to everyone that I'm seeing out in the chat. EHP Training, good morning as well. Scouts Jack, good evening. Oh, that's pretty awesome. Kenneth Jackson, afternoon for Liberty. And Will Johnson, thank you so much for being here, guys. Please keep sharing your thoughts. I'm always grateful. Sometimes I don't get to comment on everything that I see here, and I think Justin Bayola, who's here pretty regularly, a little while ago, a few episodes back, he said, at some point, we're going to get to the level where you're definitely not going to be able to even keep up with these. And some of my favorite YouTubers, like in the crypto world, for example, when I watch their live episodes, I just have to, if I'm watching on replay, I just hit top chat replay because there's no way to keep up with thousands of comments. So I'm very grateful for you guys who've been with me like right into, we're starting our third month now, and I'm very happy with the results. Slow and steady and consistent. It's something that I try to do in all my work. So one of the big issues today, yeah, wood cider. Here, look at the monkey. Look at the silly monkey. I mean, I know it's not me we're talking about, but yeah, that's exactly like people are distracted by shiny objects, and the shiny object of the day is the salacious, the soap opera, the potential horrible wrongdoings, or the potential horrible slam, the fake attack on him. Either way that you look at it, it's hard to look away. It's a train wreck, and it's something I tweeted to I think a great constitutionalist is. Brian McClanahan, who wrote Politically Incorrect Guide to the Founding Fathers and a number of other books. But Brian does a great podcast as well. I wish he would do a YouTube show. That would be really cool. Maybe I'll hit him up to do that. But I pointed out on Twitter yesterday that people are so distracted, basically saying the same thing. It's almost like we've all been manipulated into focusing all of our time on this stuff that happened decades ago and are ignoring the role of a Supreme Court justice. Like Chris Ann Hall has been so good at pointing out, like, look, you have to focus on the guy's job duties. And on his job duties, on some of the most major things, he's horrible. When it comes to saying that, he said specifically that Congress has the power to declare war, for example, but that has almost never been violated. So he's okay with all kinds of military actions around the world without a declaration of war. Well, that's totally different than what the founders said. They did not say that the executive branch could just do that. Their view of war, the legal definition of war, was use of violence by a sovereign over opposition. So a single bomb dropped on Syria is an act of war. And in many cases, even sanctions or withdrawing from treaties are acts of war. So Kavanaugh is very bad on that. And why would the so-called progressive left be okay with this guy? I mean, they're basically shooting themselves in the foot for the things they claim they care about. But then again, I was part of the far left, the anti-war movement during the Bush years. Not to say that being anti-war is just on the left. It certainly is not. But I was part of that effort on the left. And then I recognized that as Obama got out, or Obama got in, that this was gone. It just, so a lot of people are just fake in what they believe in. Anyways, I'm rambling on this more than what I wanted to. I'm basically kind of violating my own rule here. I wanted to ignore this. Let's focus back at the ranch. Some other major thing that's going on, and I think spending is a huge thing. We just had another milestone, and this report from Mike Meharry that I wanted to covered the most recent statistics on the national debt. And the fiscal year just ended, so let me pull this up here. I know it's on the screen. The fiscal year just ended, and 2018 is one of the worst in history. In fact, here's how he puts it. September 30th marked the end of the federal government's 2018 budget year. According to data released by the US Treasury Department, and I'll pull that link up here in a moment, the federal debt grew by nearly $1.3 trillion in fiscal 2018. It wasn't a $1.3 trillion debt, it grew by $1.3 trillion. And this was the sixth largest fiscal year debt increase in the history of the United States. Sixth worst ever. Mind you, the top five were all, I don't know why I was surprised about this when I asked Mike, who were the top five? They were all Barack Obama. Clearly, the man was insane when it came to the spending in the Constitution and was okay ripping everybody off. The absolute worst was Barack Obama. He has the 5 worst debt increases year over year in U.S. history. And some people will tell me that, he's better than Obama, and Clinton probably would have been another Obama. Her husband was clearly far better, so I don't know. We don't really know how that would have played out. I know she's bad on the Constitution, but even setting aside or even just acknowledging that Hillary Clinton was horrible or would have done a lot of bad things for the country, why would anyone be okay with being number 2 to Barack Obama on spending and on debt? Actually, I think he's worse than Obama on spending, but the debt, which And I'm going to mention it again, George Washington in his farewell address said, "For security and liberty, cherish public credit, use it as sparingly as possible, because when you are in debt, it is a dangerous situation. Government has to do aggressive things, or other governments do aggressive things to collect, and that creates a very nefarious situation." So let's go a little bit further. Look at this chart here. It literally it never stops going up. I think it had a tiny little dip around here, but it just keeps going up and up and up. And sooner or later, this cannot continue. Things that can't go on forever don't. As Mike puts it, for the 8th time in the last 11 years, the federal debt has grown by more than $1 trillion. As you can see from the chart, the debt continues to spiral upward, no matter which political party controls Congress and the White House. Scouse Jack is absolutely right. Bubbles gotta pop. They don't last forever. I don't know how they keep this going. I guess it's because people continue having faith in the US dollar, and as long as people continue to use it, it'll prop it up. As long as other countries continue using it. And we're actually doing some research for a report that Mike is working on as well on the SWIFT system. This is the system for international settlements between banks, between countries, and things like that. And there are now becoming to be alternatives. And the U.S. government uses the SWIFT system as a way of putting political pressure. Hey, if you don't do what we want you to do, we're going to cut you off, and you're not going to get access to the world's reserve currency. Well, if another system creeps up, then that spells trouble for the U.S. ability to continue propping up these dollars. EHP Training is absolutely right. Can't keep writing checks with no money in the bank. And that's one of the issues here. A lot of people are very happy with the tax cuts that the Trump administration put in, and I think all tax cuts are good. In fact, I would like to see, as Ron Paul used to say, the income tax cut to zero. So tax cuts are positive, but the problem is if you don't cut spending, what you're doing is you're kicking the can down the road and you're ripping someone off in the future, because sooner or later someone's getting screwed by this. I mean, we all are right now anyways. It's in order to continue propping it up, they have to keep printing more money, devaluing the currency. So how we're feeling the pain, although they may not be coming to collect this from you and I right now, the purchasing power of our dollars goes down and down and down. That's the general economic theory. So what I could buy with $20 today is far less than what I could buy with $20 years ago. I mean, we all probably have stories of our grandparents talking about how they bought gas for a nickel. I mean, think about that now. You'd fill up a tank on a quarter. I can even think of buying 18 eggs at the local Food for Less. It's like the discount grocer in the area owned by Ralph's, which is a giant conglomerate. Buying 18 eggs for 99 cents. Even if I want to get the non-organic ones, which I rarely do, that's still like $2-3. So it's 2 to 3 times higher than it was a decade or so ago. So they continue, and this is how Will Johnson puts it. Purchasing power is reduced through the continued creation of unlimited currency, whether printed or digits on a currency. So as long as they keep doing that, they keep flooding us with more. You have to have a hard limit. That's why sound money is based on having a physical limitation on how much they have. If government can keep giving you more, then basically the entire country or the entire world, the entire society has more of the same, more of the dollars or more of the purchasing unit chasing the same amount of goods. Oh, yeah. Woodsider says Ron Paul's example of that is gas is still roughly a dime. Yeah, and I've heard people say you could buy a suit 100 years ago with a silver dollar or a pair of shoes. Maybe that's what it was. Discount pair of shoes at Amazon, $15-20. I know I've bought some shoes for $20 on Amazon, which I really shouldn't. Man, as a side note, I saw that Amazon was raising their, quote, own minimum wage for their employees to $15 an hour in response to clearly somehow they just came up for this fight for 15 number. And I think it's good for really rich companies to spend more money on their employees. As a business owner, you want your people to be really loyal. And one of the great ways of making your people loyal to you and showing that you appreciate them is paying them well. I wish I could do the same with my team members. I am not loaded. But if I was like a Jeff Bezos is worth, I saw somewhere he's worth like over $100 billion. Yeah, you can pay your people better. And that's good PR for your company, because then all those hundreds of thousands of people work for you saying, yeah, you know what? I get treated really well. They pay me pretty decent for what I do. I'm happy with that. I'm working through college, or I've got a family and they allow me to take care of it. So I think that's positive PR, and I like it when companies treat their people well. That's important, just like any interpersonal relationship. But in the reports that I saw, I was reading, I was so pissed off when I'm reading this, that Amazon is going to start spending money. Instead of spending even more money on their own employees, they're going to spend more money lobbying Congress to raise the minimum wage. I don't know if it meant to $15, but this is what the nasty big companies they do. They use their power and influence to get the federal government to force things to be more expensive, more difficult through regulations and cost on their competitors. So who can't afford to pay $15 an hour? Well, small businesses, mom and pop shops. That's how you put other businesses out. Some people would rather work for the mom and pop shop for a smaller amount. They have an interpersonal relationship. They're a neighborhood person. But if Amazon is taking over and they're making it too expensive, they can't stay in business. If Amazon makes it too expensive by lobbying, now Amazon's not doing it, but Amazon is participating. They're using their weight and their cash flow to pressure the government to do this. Then, of course, that cleans out the competition, and then they get more rich, and the whole thing is really irritating. But that ties in with the problems we face. People are really desperate to earn more money, and the more that they keep inflating things, the more that they spend, the more that the debt and the deficit goes up, the more that they're going to inflate the currency, making it more difficult for individuals like you and I. So I covered this recently where the U.S. government spent a record just in August. It was the highest monthly spending record in history. So we've got number 2 worst on year-over-year debt increases to Obama, but then also the worst monthly spending, $433 billion in August alone. And Mike puts it this way: that pace looks to continue. President Trump recently signed an $853 billion spending bill. The Republicans still haven't passed an actual budget. I think EHP training, I think you had commented a few episodes ago how there isn't even a budget. And I really should cover this in more detail soon, but Mike mentions this, and it's correct. They haven't actually passed a budget, and this is part of the process and how they obfuscate and rip us all off. The most recent spending bill funds the Departments of Defense, Education, Labor, and Health and Human Services for 1 year. It also funds Obamacare. No one's talking about that anymore. But they're talking about what happened to Ms. Ford and Brett Kavanaugh in high school. But no more Obamacare. It also provides money for agencies not covered by this legislation or by a previous spending bill through December 7th. The piecemeal approach to spending makes it difficult to track exactly how much the federal government is spending. Yeah, it's just obfuscation and ripoffs. And the fact of the matter is, it isn't, while I'm very hard on the Trump administration on this and on gun control and war powers and surveillance, because I'm supportive of the Constitution and liberty, and you have to be. Like, you can't just turn a blind eye to these things. I mean, if he was making them less bad, that'd be one thing, but these things keep getting worse. We can see this chart here. I mean, yeah, he had less year-over-year debt than what Obama did, but none of these numbers are going down. That's the problem. And while I'm hard on the Trump administration, it's not just the Trump administration. It is every administration. And that's the problem with turning a blind eye to violations of the Constitution. If you think it's okay for one team to do it because your team is in charge, then the next team is going to say, well, I'm going to do the same thing. And we had a report over the summer from Andrew Tylock called Big Spenders Get Worse Every Year, The History of Growth Since 1940. Mike and I talked about this in more detail on one of our, at this point, it's every couple of weeks to monthly 10th or Tuesday episodes. And he did some research, Andrew did some research with the help of Mike, about how much each administration was spending on an average year over year, adjusted for 2009 dollars. So it was adjusted for inflation, so it matches up. And FDR, who I think we all know was a horrible big government guy, spent $512 billion per year. Bill Clinton was 4 times as bad. George W. Bush was even worse. Obama, Trump is actually at this point worse than Obama on spending. Now, someone had made the actually astute observation that, well, there's more population, so all things being equal, then of course the spending is going to go up. And I think during that show, we actually looked it up, and the population during FDR's time was around 140 million. Now it's a little more than 2 times. So you could say if they didn't increase the size and scope of government, it would have roughly doubled, let's say tripled. So at best, the worst amount of money should be 1.5 trillion or 1,500 billion. And that's about where Reagan was or Carter. But that should be in today's amount. So even at that point, government is at least, as far as spending goes, more than double the size. Even adjusting for the amount of population, keeping the same problems, they've expanded more than double over FDR. Hi to Pop Basketball, who said, hey, watching, appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for commenting. We are covering the insane amount of spending and debt, which I think is a lot of as they're destroying our currency and they're destroying the future. Here's the actual link, and I'm going to put these all in the show notes. The link from the Treasury Department, treasurydirect.gov. The total public debt outstanding is $21.6 trillion. I keep saying it. Things that can't go on forever don't. As I don't know if it was EHP training. EHP training said can't keep writing checks. Scouse Jack said bubbles are going to pop. So this is going to have horrible ramifications for us at some point in the future. They can't continue doing this. I will add all these links in the show notes after we're done with the live broadcast here. Oh, and you know, I'm so pissed off about this whole situation that I forgot to mention, if you're watching, whether it's here live or in the archive, I hope that you will smash the like button. I appreciate everyone who's commenting, but smash that like button. It really helps us spread the word. It tells YouTube that you're enjoying it and that you should show it to other people, And with that, I want to close out with this, I think, timeless quote from Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson says, "The principle of spending money to be paid by posterity under the name of funding is but swindling futurity on a large scale." They're ripping us off on a grand scale. They're ripping future generations off on a grand scale. And that's why we need to point it out, say no to this, and not be okay with one team doing it or the other just for political reasons or for supporting one major political party or over the other. So I hope you learned something from this today. It's not positive news. I know I've been learning as we go on this. I'm learning more and more about the economics. I'm grateful for all the research that Mike Meharry and Andrew Tylock do. Mike is a day-to-day reporter for Peter Schiff at schiffgold.com. He also does the weekly podcast. So he's I think, one of the, as far as bloggers go around the country, he's one of the best experts on these types of questions. So I'm very grateful for his work here with us at the 10th Amendment Center, bringing this type of thing to my attention and to all of ours to be able to discuss it further. Of course, and I know I mentioned it late, if you're enjoying the show, you find it interesting, even though it is not positive news, please smash that like button. Leave some comments later on in the archives, and of course, share it widely with your friends. I will be back on Friday, and again, Monday, Wednesday, Friday every week, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time here on the West Coast. I hope you have a wonderful Wednesday, and I'll see you again on Friday. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.